The gentle sigh of the ocean was the first thing Alara noticed, even before she fully opened her eyes. It was a sound that had been absent from her life for far too long, replaced by the relentless hum of city traffic and the distant wail of sirens. Here, in Havenwood by the sea, it was a lullaby. A promise of peace she hadn't realized how desperately she needed. Sunlight, filtered through the delicate lace curtains of her rented cottage, painted soft patterns on the aged wooden floorboards. The air carried the crisp, invigorating scent of salt and pine, a stark contrast to the stale air of her old apartment. Alara stretched, a languid, contented arch of her back, and finally pushed herself up. Her new home, a small, two-bedroom cottage affectionately named Seaworthy by its previous owner, was a testament to simple charm. Its pale blue exterior was weathered by years of sea breezes, and a riot of climbing roses, still in bloom despite the late autumn chill, clung to the porch. Inside, whitewashed walls and quirky nautical touches, a ship's wheel salvaged from a long-lost vessel, a collection of polished sea glass on the mantelpiece, gave it an immediate sense of belonging, as if it had been waiting for her. Alara made her way to the tiny kitchen, where a single, steaming mug of Earl Grey awaited her. She'd always been an early riser, but here, the mornings felt different. Less about obligation, more about quiet anticipation. She carried her tea to the back porch, a small wooden deck overlooking a wild, untamed garden that sloped gently down to a hidden stretch of beach. The view stole her breath every single time. The sea, a vast expanse of shimmering silver and deep sapphire, stretched to meet a horizon blurred by mist. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries a mournful, yet oddly comforting, counterpoint to the rhythmic crash and retreat of the waves. This was why she had come. To paint, yes. To find inspiration. But mostly, to heal. 6 months ago, her life had been a meticulously planned canvas of corporate ambition, vibrant cityscapes, and the comforting predictability of a relationship that she now realized had been more habit than heart. Then the canvas had been ripped. A sudden, unexpected redundancy, followed swiftly by a quiet, mutual parting of ways with Daniel. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting or tears, just a slow, painful recognition that they were no longer walking the same path. Left adrift, Alara had felt an unfamiliar emptiness, a loss of direction that had left her creativity, her true passion, stagnant. It was a chance encounter with an online listing for Seaworthy Cottage that had planted the seed. A small coastal town, far from everything she knew, promising solitude and the raw, untamed beauty of the sea. She'd packed her bags, her canvases, and a heart full of weary hope, and driven west until the city lights were a distant memory and the air tasted of salt. Now, a week into her new life, Alara felt the first stirrings of something akin to peace. Each morning, she walked the beach, collecting fragments of sea glass and interesting pebbles, her pockets growing heavy with the ocean's treasures. Each afternoon she set up her easel in the sunniest spot of the cottage, or, if the weather permitted, directly on the beach, trying to capture the shifting moods of the water. Today, after her tea, she decided to explore the town itself. Havenwood by the sea was nestled in a protective cove, a cluster of brightly painted houses clinging to the hillside above a small, active harbor. The main street, quaint and cobblestoned, wound its way past independent shops, a bakery whose scent of warm bread wafted enticingly, a bookstore with a worn wooden sign, and a small art gallery that made Alara's heart skip a beat. She started with the bakery, drawn in by the irresistible aroma. A cheerful woman with flour dusting her apron and a smile that reached her eyes greeted her. "Morning, love. Fresh cinnamon rolls just out of the oven. You must be Alara, from Seaworthy Cottage." Alara blinked, surprised. "Good morning. Yes, that's me. How did you know?" The baker chuckled, her eyes twinkling. "Oh, dearie. Havenwood's a small town. New faces don't go unnoticed. I'm Maggie. Welcome. Hope you're settling in well." "I am, thank you, Maggie. It's wonderful here." Alara felt a warmth spread through her, a small spark of connection. This was different from the impersonal anonymity of the city. Maggie wrapped a cinnamon roll in parchment paper and handed it over. "On the house for a new neighbor. Enjoy your exploration." With a warm roll and an even warmer feeling in her chest, Elira continued her stroll. She found the local library, a charming stone building with a reading nook overlooking the harbor. She discovered a tiny antique shop overflowing with forgotten treasures, and a general store that seemed to stock everything from fishing bait to artisanal cheeses. The harbor itself was a hub of quiet activity. Fishing boats, their nets neatly stacked, bobbed gently beside sleek pleasure craft. The air here was thicker with the tang of salt and diesel, the cries of gulls louder. At the far end of the dock she saw a small boatyard, a collection of sheds, and half-finished vessels under various stages of repair. The rhythmic tap-tap-tap-ti of a hammer on wood carried across the water. Elira paused, drawn by the sound. A man was working on the hull of a small wooden sailboat, his back to her. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and his movements were precise, confident. His dark hair, slightly long, was pushed back from his forehead, and even from this distance, Elira could sense an intensity in his focus. There was something grounded, elemental, about him, like the old, sturdy boats he worked on. She watched for a moment longer than strictly necessary, a flicker of curiosity stirring within her, before reminding herself that she was here for solitude, not distraction. She continued her walk, the image of him etched faintly in her mind. The rest of her week settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings were for beach walks and painting, afternoons for exploring new paths along the cliffs, or curling up with a book by the window, listening to the rain. Evenings were for simple meals, accompanied by the ceaseless murmur of the sea, a soundtrack to her quiet introspection. She found herself returning to the boatyard, not to stare, but simply because her walks often led her that way. She'd catch glimpses of the man, always absorbed in his work, sometimes sanding, sometimes varnishing, sometimes lost in the intricate dance of rope and knot. She learned his name from Maggie at the bakery. Finn O'Connell. He was a local, owned the boatyard, inherited it from his father. A quiet man, Maggie had added, but good-hearted. One blustery afternoon, Elira was perched on a driftwood log at her favorite secluded cove, sketching. The wind whipped her hair around her face, and the waves crashed with a spectacular ferocity, throwing spray high into the air. She was completely absorbed, trying to capture the raw power of the ocean, when a sudden gust tore her sketchbook from her grasp. It cartwheeled across the sand, pages flapping wildly before landing perilously close to the water's edge. "Oh, no!" she gasped, scrambling to her feet. She dashed after it, but a particularly large wave chose that moment to surge further up the beach, threatening to engulf her precious drawings. Just as the water reached the edge of the sketchbook, a hand, strong and tanned, snatched it up. Elira looked up, startled, into a pair of eyes the color of the stormy sea itself, deep gray blue, framed by dark lashes. It was Finn. He stood before her, a weathered canvas jacket pulled tight against the wind, a faint smudge of sawdust on his cheek. He held her sketchbook carefully, protecting it from the spray. "Here," he said, his voice a low rumble, surprisingly soft against the roar of the wind. Almost lost it. Her heart gave a little flutter, a sensation she hadn't felt in a long time. Up close he was even more striking than she'd imagined. Lines of sun and expression fanned out from his eyes, hinting at a life lived outdoors, under the wide sky. There was a quiet strength about him, a stillness that was both reassuring and intriguing. "Thank you," Elira managed, her voice a little breathless from the wind and the unexpected encounter. She reached for her sketchbook, her fingers brushing against his as he handed it over. A spark, tiny yet potent, passed between them. Her skin tingled. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "No problem. Looks like quite the storm brewing." He gestured to the turbulent sea. "It does," she agreed, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. "But it's beautiful." A faint smile touched his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "It is. The sea has many faces." He paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment, a silent question in his eyes. "You're the artist, aren't you? From Seaworthy Cottage?" Elira felt a blush creep up her neck. "Yes, Elira, and you're Finn." "That's me." He didn't elaborate, didn't offer any further small talk. He simply stood there, solid and watchful, as the wind whipped around them. The silence that settled was not awkward, but rather felt natural, filled with the roar of the ocean and the unspoken observations passing between them. He seemed to take her in, not with intrusive curiosity, but with a quiet assessing gaze, as if he were trying to understand the brushstrokes of her own story. "Well," Ilara finally said, feeling the chill begin to seep into her bones. "Thank you again, Finn, for saving my sketches." "Anytime," he replied, his voice still low, but with a hint of something warm beneath it. He then turned, a man of few words, and began to walk back along the beach, his silhouette growing smaller against the churning gray sea. Ilara watched him go, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her. Relief that her sketchbook was safe, a lingering warmth from the brush of his fingers, and a profound sense of curiosity about the quiet man who worked with wood and sails and seemed as much a part of Havenwood by the sea as the tide itself. She spent the walk back to her cottage replaying the brief encounter, the sound of his voice, the intensity of his eyes. She hadn't sought out connection. Not really. She'd come here to mend herself, to find her own rhythm again. Yet, the brief interaction with Finn had stirred something within her, a ripple in the calm waters she was trying to cultivate. It wasn't a dramatic, heart-pounding crush, but rather a gentle, persistent hum of interest, like a faint melody carried on the wind. Later that evening, as darkness fell, and the lighthouse beam began its slow, sweeping arc across the water, Ilara sat by her window, a cup of herbal tea warming her hands. She thought of Finn, wondering if he was still at the boatyard, or if he had a quiet cottage like hers, listening to the same ocean symphony. She opened her sketchbook, carefully turning to the page where she'd been attempting to capture the wildness of the waves. Her hand, usually so sure, felt a little shaky. She found herself sketching not the sea, but a profile, a strong jawline, a lock of dark hair falling across a forehead. She quickly erased it, feeling a flush of embarrassment. This wasn't why she was here. Yet, as she drifted off to sleep, the whispers on the tide seemed to carry a new note, a subtle hint of a story just beginning to unfold. The quiet strength of a man, the unexpected warmth of a small town, and the promise of a future that felt, for the first time in a long time, both open and full of possibility. She knew, deep down, that her journey of healing was far from over, but perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't meant to walk it entirely alone. The sea had brought her to Havenwood, and it seemed it had a few more surprises in store. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of apricot and rose, mirroring the gentle warmth that had begun to bloom in Ilara's chest. She had come to Havenwood seeking quiet, a place where the echoes of her past wouldn't reverberate quite so loudly. What she was finding, however, was a melody, softly played by the waves and the kind eyes of a man who seemed to understand silence as well as she did. The next morning, Ilara awoke to the cry of gulls and the scent of salt carried on the breeze through her open window. Her small cottage, perched on a rise overlooking the harbor, felt more like home than any place she'd inhabited in years. It was modest, with whitewashed walls and quirky mismatched furniture that seemed to have stories of its own. She made herself a mug of tea, strong and comforting, and stepped out onto the tiny porch. The town of Havenwood was stirring below, a gentle hum of activity. Fishing boats, painted in cheerful blues and greens, bobbed rhythmically in the harbor. A few figures moved along the docks, preparing for the day's work. Ilara spent the morning unpacking the few boxes she'd brought with her. Each item, a book, a worn blanket, a framed photograph of a lighthouse she'd once visited, felt like a small anchor, grounding her in this new reality. She knew that healing wasn't about forgetting, but about learning to carry the past without letting it weigh her down entirely. Here, in Havenwood, with the sea as her constant companion, she felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Later, she decided to truly explore the town. Havenwood was even more charming by daylight. The main street was cobbled, lined with quaint shops, their windows displaying everything from handmade pottery to freshly baked bread. She found a small bookstore, its shelves overflowing with well-loved volumes, and lost herself among the pages for a blissful hour. The scent of old paper and ink was a balm to her soul. She bought a novel, a classic tale of resilience and hope, and a small, leather-bound journal. Perhaps she thought it was time to start writing her own story again. As she emerged from the bookstore, a familiar face caught her eye. Liam was sitting on a bench outside the general store, mending a fishing net, his brow furrowed in concentration. He wore a faded blue shirt that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders, and his hands, though calloused, moved with a surprising dexterity. He looked up as if sensing her presence, and a slow, easy smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his kind eyes. "Morning," he rumbled, his voice like the steady beat of the waves. "Finding your way around?" Elara returned his smile, a genuine warmth spreading through her. "I am. It's a beautiful town, Liam." He nodded, his gaze sweeping over the street. "It has its charms. You settling in all right?" "I am, thank you. The cottage is perfect." She hesitated, then added, "It feels right." He held her gaze for a moment, a silent understanding passing between them. "Good," he said simply, then returned to his net. But not before she noticed the slight lingering in his eyes, a gentle curiosity that made her heart flutter just a little. Over the next few days, Elara fell into a comfortable routine. Mornings were for quiet reflection, sometimes sketching the coastline from her porch, sometimes simply watching the gulls. Afternoons were for exploring the winding paths around Havenwood, discovering hidden coves and ancient trees. She found a small, secluded beach that quickly became her sanctuary, a place where she could sit for hours, listening to the rhythm of the waves, feeling the sun on her skin, and slowly, gently, letting go of the anxieties that still clung to her. She often ran into Liam, sometimes on the docks, sometimes at the general store, once even walking along the same stretch of beach she favored. Their interactions were brief but meaningful, filled with comfortable silences and simple exchanges. He never pressed her for details about her past, never pried, but his presence was a quiet comfort, a steady anchor in her new world. She learned that he lived in a small, sturdy house near the harbor, that he'd been a fisherman his whole life, just like his father and grandfather before him. He spoke of the sea with a reverence that resonated deeply with her own burgeoning connection to it. One afternoon, a particularly strong gust of wind swept through Havenwood, rattling the windows of Elara's cottage and sending her newly purchased potted herbs tumbling from the porch railing. She sighed, surveying the broken terracotta and scattered soil. Just as she was about to start cleaning up, a knock sounded at her door. It was Liam, holding a sturdy wooden trellis in one hand and a bag of potting soil in the other. "Heard the wind picked up," he said, a faint smudge of dirt on his cheek. "Saw your herbs took a tumble, thought these might help." Elara's eyes widened. "Liam, you didn't have to." He shrugged, a characteristic gesture. "Neighbors help neighbors in Havenwood. Besides, heard Mrs. Henderson at the market talking about how excited you were about those basil plants. Wouldn't want them to go to waste." He gestured to the trellis. "This'll give them something to climb, help them weather the next storm." A warmth spread through Elara, deeper than the afternoon sun. "Thank you," she said, her voice a little choked. "That's incredibly kind." He just offered his gentle smile. "Mind if I help replant them?" Together they knelt on her porch, carefully transferring the bruised but resilient herbs into new, sturdier pots, securing them to the trellis Liam had brought. Their hands occasionally brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through Elara that she tried to ignore, but couldn't quite. The scent of damp earth mingled with the fresh sea air, and for the first time in a very long time, Elara felt truly cared for. It wasn't a romantic gesture in the grand dramatic sense, but it was profoundly tender, a quiet act of service that spoke volumes. As they finished, Elara straightened up, brushing dirt from her jeans. "Can I offer you some tea, or maybe a coffee?" "Tea sounds good," he said, his eyes crinkling. "Might even stay a while if you don't mind the company." They sat on her porch, sipping hot tea, the silence between them no longer just comfortable, but rich with unspoken understanding. Elara found herself telling him about her love for the sea, how it had always called to her, even in her darkest times. She didn't delve into the specifics of her past pain, but she spoke of a feeling of being adrift, of needing to find solid ground again. Liam listened intently, his gaze steady, occasionally offering a thoughtful nod. "The sea," he said, after she finished, his voice soft. "It takes, but it also gives. It's a powerful healer, if you let it." He then shared a story about his grandfather, a man who had lost his own boat in a fierce storm but had found a new purpose helping others rebuild theirs. His words were simple, but they resonated with Ilara's own journey. He understood the concept of losing and finding, of resilience in the face of nature's raw power. As the sun began to dip, casting long shadows across the harbor, Liam eventually stood to leave. "Well, those herbs should be happier now," he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Don't hesitate if you need anything else, Ilara." It was the first time he'd used her name in a direct way, and it felt like a soft caress, a recognition of her as a person. "I won't," she promised, her heart doing a little flip-flop. "And thank you again, Liam, truly." He gave her a final warm smile before heading down the path, leaving Ilara with a lingering scent of earth and salt, and a feeling of contentment she hadn't known was possible. She wasn't just settling into Havenwood, she was slowly, tentatively, allowing Havenwood, and perhaps Liam, to settle into her heart. The days continued to weave their gentle tapestry. Ilara started sketching again, drawing the intricate patterns of the waves, the weathered faces of the fishing boats, the gnarled branches of ancient trees that clung to the cliffs. It was a way to process her emotions, to find beauty in the brokenness, to transform pain into art. She found herself drawn to the local craft market held every Saturday in the town square. It was a vibrant hub of activity, filled with the laughter of children, the chatter of vendors, and the aroma of freshly baked goods. Here, she met Mrs. Albright, a sprightly woman with twinkling eyes who sold hand-knitted scarves and seemed to know everyone's story. "You're a new resident in the old Miller cottage, aren't you, dear?" Mrs. Albright asked, her voice warm as she peered over her spectacles. "I'm Eleanor. Welcome to Havenwood." Ilara smiled, feeling instantly at ease. "Ilara, it's lovely to meet you, Eleanor. And yes, the cottage is wonderful." "It always was a lucky place," Eleanor declared, nodding sagely. "Old Mr. Miller, he always said the sea whispers secrets to those who listen." She paused, her gaze thoughtful. "You look like a listener, dear." Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck. "I try to be." As she browsed the stalls, a familiar figure appeared. Liam, looking surprisingly handsome in a clean, pressed shirt, was helping a younger woman, likely his sister, set up a stall laden with fresh seafood. He caught Ilara's eye, and his customary slow smile brightened his face. He excused himself from his sister and walked over. "Ilara," he greeted, his voice low and pleasant. "Enjoying the market?" "It's wonderful," she replied, gesturing around. "So much life here." "It is," he agreed, his eyes sweeping over her, lingering for a moment before meeting hers. "My sister, Clara, runs the seafood stall. She's quite the fisherwoman herself." He gestured for her to follow him. "Come meet her." Clara was a lively woman with Liam's kind eyes and a mischievous grin. "So you're Ilara," she exclaimed, her handshake firm. "Liam's been telling me about you, says you've got a good eye for the sea." Ilara laughed, feeling a warmth she hadn't expected. "He just helped me save my herb garden." "He's good at that," Clara winked, glancing at her brother. "Always fixing things or people." Liam just grunted good-naturedly, a faint blush on his cheeks, which only made Ilara smile wider. She spent a pleasant hour chatting with Clara and Liam, learning more about their family, about the rhythm of life in Havenwood. She learned that Liam was the quiet anchor of his family, always there to help, always steady. Clara, on the other hand, was a whirlwind of energy, always planning the next big catch or the next town event. The ease with which they included her, a complete stranger, into their conversation made her feel less like an outsider and more like she was already a part of something. Before she left the market, Liam stopped her. "There's a potluck dinner at the community hall next Saturday," he said, his gaze earnest. "Just a casual gathering. Everyone brings a dish. Would you consider coming?" Ilara's heart did another little leap. A potluck. It sounded so utterly normal, so wonderfully communal. For so long, her life had been solitary, shrouded in a self-imposed isolation. "I'd love to, Liam," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "What should I bring?" His smile was genuine and relieved. "Anything you like. Just your company would be enough." The week that followed was filled with a quiet anticipation. Ilara found herself humming as she sketched, her mind drifting to the upcoming potluck. She decided to bake something simple but heartfelt, a berry crumble using fresh local berries she'd found at a roadside stand. The process of baking, the familiar scents filling her small cottage, felt therapeutic. It was a small act of creation, a gentle step towards re-engaging with life. When Saturday evening arrived, Elara dressed carefully in a simple, soft blue dress that matched the color of her eyes, a color she found herself gravitating towards more and more since arriving in Havenwood. She carried her berry crumble still warm and fragrant to the community hall. The sound of laughter and cheerful chatter spilled out into the evening air, drawing her in. The hall was bustling. Long tables were laden with a colorful array of dishes, and people mingled, holding plates and mugs, their voices weaving a tapestry of friendly conversation. Elara felt a pang of nervousness, a familiar hesitation, but then she saw Liam. He was standing near the entrance, talking to an older gentleman, and his eyes found hers almost immediately. A smile lit his face, and he excused himself, moving towards her with that steady, unhurried gait. "You came," he said, his voice warm with a hint of pleasure. "And you brought something delicious, I can tell." "Of course," she replied, feeling her nervousness melt away under his calm gaze. "It's a berry crumble." He nodded approvingly. "Sounds perfect. Come on, let me introduce you to a few more folks." And he did. He introduced her to Eleanor Albright, who greeted her with a knowing wink, and to Clara, who immediately offered her a plate piled high with various dishes. He introduced her to old Mr. Henderson, the general store owner, and to the cheerful couple who ran the bakery. With Liam by her side, Elara found herself relaxing, engaging in conversations, even laughing. She learned about Havenwood's annual regatta, about the best fishing spots, about the town's long history of resilience against the sea. Liam remained close, not possessively, but as a quiet anchor. He made sure her plate was full, refilled her drink, and occasionally offered a thoughtful comment that drew her into a conversation or put her at ease. He didn't hover, but his presence was a constant, comforting assurance. Later, as the evening began to wind down, Elara found herself outside on the porch of the community hall, looking up at the countless stars that dotted the inky sky, unmarred by city lights. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the lingering scent of wood smoke and the distant murmur of the sea. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Liam's voice came from beside her, startling her slightly. She hadn't heard him approach. "Breathtaking," she agreed, turning her head to look at him. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the stars. The soft light from the hall cast a gentle glow on his profile, highlighting the strong lines of his jaw and the thoughtful expression in his eyes. "I used to come out here with my dad when I was a boy," he murmured, his voice soft, almost wistful. "He'd teach me the constellations, tell me stories about the sailors who navigated by them. Said the stars were like old friends, always there, always guiding." Elara listened, captivated by this rare glimpse into his past. "That's a beautiful thought," she said. "I've always loved the stars, but I never thought of them as friends." "They can be," he said, turning his gaze from the sky to meet hers. His eyes, usually so steady, held a deeper glint in the starlight, a quiet intensity that made her breath catch. "Especially when you feel lost, they remind you that there's always a path, even if you can't see it clearly yet." His words resonated deeply with her own journey. She had felt lost for so long, adrift in a sea of grief and uncertainty. And now, here she was, under a sky full of ancient friends, with a man whose quiet strength felt like a beacon. I felt very lost for a while," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. The honesty felt raw, but safe in his presence. "And Havenwood, it's been a haven, more than I ever expected." Liam reached out, his hand hovering for a moment, then gently covering hers where it rested on the wooden railing. His touch was warm, reassuring, a silent promise of support. "That's what it's here for," he said, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "For folks who need a bit of peace, and for folks who need to remember they're not alone." Elara looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. His eyes were filled with a gentle understanding, a deep compassion that saw beyond her carefully constructed walls, straight into the vulnerable core of her being. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet hum of the night, and the distant lull of the waves, Alara felt a profound connection, a recognition of something true and precious. The world had shifted for her. Havenwood was no longer just a place to heal. It was becoming a place to live. And Liam, with his quiet strength and unwavering kindness, was becoming more than just a friendly face. He was a presence, a comfort, a gentle possibility that whispered of a future she hadn't dared to dream of. Her journey of healing was indeed far from over, but the path felt brighter now, less solitary, illuminated by the steady light of a man who saw her, truly saw her, and offered his hand not to pull her along, but to walk beside her. The sea, indeed, had brought her to Havenwood, and it seemed, its surprises were only just beginning to unfold. The stars above shimmered, old friends perhaps winking down at a story just beginning to write itself. The stars above shimmered, old friends perhaps, winking down at a story just beginning to write itself. Alara woke with the memory of those winking stars still a gentle weight behind her eyelids, and a warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun already streaming through her cottage window. Liam. Away. His name bloomed in her mind, soft and comforting. She remembered the easy conversation, the shared silence, the way his eyes had held hers with such unwavering kindness. It wasn't a dramatic, sweeping gesture that had stirred her, but the quiet, steady presence of a man who seemed to understand the spaces between her words, and who didn't shy away from them. She stretched, a rare feeling of lightness in her limbs. The sea air, crisp and clean, invigorated her as she made her way to the small kitchen. A pot of coffee brewed, filling the cottage with its rich aroma, a simple luxury she now savored. As she sipped her coffee on the small porch, overlooking the wild garden, she found herself smiling. A genuine, unforced smile. Havenwood was working its magic, and Liam, she realized, was a significant part of that enchantment. Later that morning, as she walked along the beach collecting pieces of sea glass, her phone vibrated. A text from Liam. Morning, Alara. Hope you slept well. Thinking of a walk up to the old lighthouse later this afternoon, if you're free. It's a beautiful view when the tide is out. Her heart gave a small, happy flutter. It was precisely the kind of low-pressure invitation she appreciated. No expectations, just an offer of shared beauty. Sounds lovely, Liam. What time were you thinking? Me, she replied, a lightness in her fingers as she typed. Around 3? We can grab a coffee from Eleanor's first. Perfect. See you then. Later. The anticipation hummed beneath her skin for the rest of the day. She busied herself with sorting her sea glass, arranging them by color and transparency, her mind drifting occasionally to the afternoon. She chose a simple, comfortable dress, feeling a quiet confidence that had been absent for too long. At 2:45, she walked the short distance to Eleanor's, a charming little cafe with mismatched chairs and the scent of freshly baked goods. Liam was already there, leaning against the counter, chatting easily with Eleanor, a woman with a kind, crinkled smile and a perpetually flour-dusted apron. He turned as Alara entered, his smile warm and genuine, reaching his eyes. Alara, there you are, he said, pushing himself off the counter. Eleanor, this is Alara, my new neighbor. Eleanor beamed. Oh yes, the artist. Liam's been telling me about your lovely cottage. Welcome to Havenwood, dear. What can I get for you? Alara felt a blush creep up her neck at being introduced as the artist, a label she hadn't quite claimed for herself yet. Just a black coffee, please, Eleanor. It's lovely to meet you. And you, Eleanor replied, already bustling to prepare it. As they walked towards the path that led to the lighthouse, the salty air whipping gently around them, Alara felt a sense of ease settle over her. So, the artist, huh? She teased, glancing at Liam. He chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. Well, you Gary an artist, aren't you? Your cottage is filled with beautiful things, and your eye for detail, the way you spoke about the light, it's clear to me. He looked at her, his expression earnest. Don't sell yourself short, Alara. There's a quiet brilliance about you. His words, simple and sincere, disarmed her. She hadn't realized how much she craved that kind of affirmation. Her past had taught her to shrink, to hide her light. But Liam saw it, and he wasn't afraid to acknowledge it. The path to the lighthouse was winding, through sparse wind-sculpted trees, and over rocky terrain. They talked about Havenwood, about the changing seasons, about the history of the lighthouse, a sentinel standing guard over generations of fishermen and sailors. Liam spoke of his own work, restoring old wooden boats, his passion evident in the way his hands gestured, describing the grain of the wood, the curve of a hull. Elara found herself captivated, not just by his words but by the quiet strength and dedication that radiated from him. When they reached the top, the view was breathtaking. The vast expanse of the ocean stretched out before them, shimmering under the late afternoon sun, meeting the pale blue sky at a hazy horizon. Below, the tide was indeed out, revealing a patchwork of sand and tidal pools, dotted with foraging gulls. "It's incredible," Elara breathed, feeling a familiar ache in her chest, but this time it was a yearning for beauty, not sorrow. She pulled out her small camera, a habit she was slowly rediscovering, and began to take pictures, capturing the play of light on the water, the texture of the rocks, the stoic silhouette of the lighthouse itself. Liam watched her, a soft smile playing on his lips. He didn't interrupt, didn't rush her. He simply stood beside her, a steady, grounding presence. When she finally lowered her camera, a sigh of contentment escaping her lips, he said, "You see things, Elara. Things most people walk right past." "It's what I used to do," she admitted, her voice quiet. "See the world through a lens, capture its fleeting moments." She paused, then added, "For a long time, I just stopped seeing anything at all." He didn't pry, didn't offer platitudes. He just nodded slowly, his gaze gentle. "But you're seeing again now?" "Yes," she whispered, meeting his eyes. "Thanks to Havenwood, and well," she hesitated, "thanks to you." The admission hung in the air, fragile and sincere. Liam's smile deepened, a warmth spreading through her. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. It was a look of understanding, of acceptance, of a quiet promise to continue walking beside her. Over the next few weeks their connection deepened, woven into the fabric of Havenwood life. They fell into an easy rhythm of shared moments, morning walks on the beach, Liam dropping by her cottage with a basket of fresh produce from the farmer's market, impromptu dinners where Elara discovered a burgeoning joy in cooking, simple, wholesome meals for two. One blustery afternoon, Liam arrived at her cottage, a sturdy toolbox in hand. "The postman mentioned your gate was a bit wobbly," he said, an easy grin on his face. "Thought I might take a look." Elara, who had been struggling with the stubborn latch for days, felt a rush of gratitude. "Oh, Liam, you don't have to." "Nonsense," he cut in gently. "It's what neighbors do." While he worked on the gate, Elara watched him, admiring the focused intensity in his eyes, the skilled movements of his hands. He was patient, methodical, his brow furrowed in concentration. She felt a sense of peace watching him, a quiet assurance that he was a man who fixed things, not just gates, but perhaps, in his own gentle way, parts of her world that felt broken. Later, as the gate swung smoothly on newly oiled hinges, he wiped his hands on a rag. "There you go, good as new." "Thank you, Liam," she said, her voice soft with genuine appreciation. "It means a lot." He shrugged, but his eyes were warm. "Anytime, Elara." He paused, then looked around her small wild garden. "You know, this place has so much potential. With a bit of pruning and some new plants, it could be truly spectacular." Elara sighed. "I know, I just haven't quite had the energy or the vision for it yet." The garden, like so many other aspects of her life, had been left to its own devices after her world had crumbled. "Well," Liam said, a spark in his eyes, "I'm pretty handy with a spade. And I know a thing or two about coastal plants that thrive here. What do you say? We could tackle it together?" The offer was unexpected, yet perfectly aligned with the quiet way he offered support. It wasn't about him taking over, but about Wytham and doing it, together. A shared project, a tangible way to breathe new life into her surroundings. "I'd like that very much, Liam," she said, a genuine smile gracing her lips. "I'd like that a lot." And so, their garden project began. It became a ritual, a slow, satisfying process of clearing weeds, turning soil, and planting. Liam, with his practical knowledge, taught her about the different types of soil, the best times to plant, the hardiness of certain shrubs against the sea winds. Elara, with her artist's eye, envisioned pathways, color palettes, and quiet nooks for contemplation. Working side by side, their conversations flowed easily. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, the small joys and sorrows that made up a life. Alara found herself sharing snippets of her past, vague and generalized, but enough for Liam to understand the depth of her journey. She spoke of a time when she had felt lost, adrift, and how Havenwood felt like a mooring. She didn't dwell on the pain, but acknowledged its existence, and Liam listened without judgment, his presence a comforting balm. One afternoon, as they were planting a cluster of vibrant hydrangeas, Liam paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "You know, Alara, you've really transformed this place. It's not just the plants, it's the energy. It feels more alive, more OG." She looked around at the nascent garden, already showing signs of life and order. "It's because of you too, Liam," she said softly. "You helped me see the potential, not just in the garden, but in—" She met his gaze, her heart feeling full. "You have a way of making things feel possible." He smiled, a quiet, gentle smile that reached deep into her. He didn't deny it, didn't deflect the compliment. He simply held her gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. In that moment, surrounded by the scent of earth and the promise of blossoms, Alara felt a profound sense of connection, a warmth that settled deep in her soul. Word of Alara's presence in Havenwood, and her quiet, artistic pursuits, began to spread. Eleanor at the cafe, ever the town's genial hub, often mentioned Alara's wonderful eye to her customers. One afternoon, a small bustling woman with bright, inquisitive eyes introduced herself as Maggie, the owner of the Haven's Hearth, a charming little gift shop that specialized in local crafts. "Eleanor tells me you're a photographer, dear," Maggie said, her voice a cheerful chirp. "And your cottage garden is becoming quite the talk of the town. I was wondering, Alara, would you ever consider displaying some of your prints in my shop? We get a lot of tourists, and I think your work would be just perfect. Something to capture the spirit of Havenwood." Alara's breath hitched. Displaying her work? Putting herself out there, truly out there after so long? A wave of apprehension washed over her, a familiar tightening in her chest. Her past experiences with vulnerability had been painful. She felt a flicker of the old fear, the urge to retreat. "Oh, Maggie, that's very kind of you," Alara stammered, her gaze darting to Liam, who was quietly pruning a rosebush nearby. I haven't really shown my work in years." Liam straightened, sensing her discomfort. He walked over, offering a reassuring smile. "It's a wonderful idea, Maggie. Alara's work is truly exceptional." He turned to Alara, his eyes gentle but firm. "You have a gift, Alara. Why keep it hidden?" His words were not a push, but an encouragement, a reminder of the quiet brilliance he saw in her. Maggie, meanwhile, was undeterred. "No pressure, dear, of course. Just think about it. If you ever change your mind, the offer stands." She handed Alara a business card. "And do pop by for a cup of tea sometime. I make a delightful Earl Grey." After Maggie left, Alara still felt a tremor in her hands. "I don't know, Liam," she confessed, running a hand through her hair. "It's just a lot to put myself out there again. What if no one likes them? What if it brings back unwanted attention?" The last part was whispered, a ghost of a fear she rarely articulated. Liam sat beside her on the garden bench, his presence solid and comforting. He took her hand, his thumb gently stroking her knuckles. "Alara, I understand your hesitation, and you don't have to do anything you're not ready for, but I also know your photographs are beautiful. They capture the raw, honest beauty of this place, and I think people would connect with that. As for unwanted attention," his gaze was steady. "Havenwood is a small, close-knit community. We look out for our own, and you wouldn't be alone." His words were a lifeline. The thought of having a community, a safety net, after so many years of feeling isolated, was incredibly potent. He wasn't dismissing her fears, but acknowledging them, and then offering a shield. She looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his touch spread through her. "What if I just tried a few? Small ones, maybe?" she murmured, the idea taking hesitant root. Liam squeezed her hand. "That sounds like a perfect first step. No pressure, just dipping your toe in the water. And if it feels good, wonderful. If not, then no harm done. Over the next few days, with Liam's quiet encouragement, Alara started sifting through her digital archives, rediscovering photographs she hadn't looked at in years. The images were a testament to her unique vision: the raw power of the ocean, the delicate details of wildflowers, the weathered faces of Havenwood's fishermen, all imbued with a poignant beauty. She selected a few, framed them simply, and felt a nervous flutter as she carried them to Maggie's shop. Liam walked with her, carrying 2 of the larger frames. "You've got this," he whispered as they approached the Haven's hearth. Maggie greeted them with open arms and a delighted gasp when she saw the prints. "Oh, Alara, these are exquisite. They truly capture the essence of Havenwood. I knew it." She immediately found a prominent spot near the window, arranging them with care. Leaving the shop, Alara felt a strange mix of exhilaration and vulnerability. It was a step, a big one, out of her comfortable shell. Liam, sensing her emotional state, didn't push for conversation. He simply walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers, a silent anchor in her swirling emotions. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, they sat on her porch swing, a comfortable silence settling between them. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and the distant cry of gulls. "Thank you, Liam," she said, finally breaking the quiet. "For today, for everything." He turned to her, his profile silhouetted against the fading light. "You don't have to thank me, Alara. Watching you come alive again, seeing you rediscover your passions, it's a privilege." He paused, then his gaze deepened. "You're truly remarkable, you know that." Her heart skipped a beat. His words, spoken with such sincerity, resonated deep within her. For so long, she had felt anything but remarkable. She had felt broken, invisible, a shadow of her former self. But Liam saw something different. He saw her strength, her talent, her quiet resilience. A comfortable silence descended again, but this time it was filled with unspoken understanding, a growing tenderness. Alara found herself leaning slightly closer to him, drawn by his steady warmth. She felt a sense of safety she hadn't known was possible, a deep-seated peace that settled into her bones. Her journey of healing was indeed far from over, but the path felt brighter now, less solitary, illuminated by the steady light of a man who saw her, truly saw her, and offered his hand not to pull her along, but to walk beside her. The sea indeed had brought her to Havenwood, and it seemed its surprises were only just beginning to unfold. As the first stars began to prick through the twilight sky, Alara looked up, a soft smile gracing her lips. The future, once a daunting shrouded landscape, now felt like an unfolding canvas, vibrant with possibility, and she found herself eager to see the colors it would bring. The soft hum of the evening tide was a lullaby against the shore, and the scent of salt and pine filled the air. Liam, who had offered his hand, was a quiet presence beside her. He didn't speak as they walked back towards the guest house, but his steady pace and the warmth of his fingers around hers spoke volumes. Alara found herself relaxing into the moment, the anxieties that usually clutched her heart loosening their grip under the vast, star-dusted sky. "Thank you," she murmured as they reached the porch of Mrs. Gable's guest house. The light from the sitting room spilled out, casting a warm, inviting glow. Liam smiled, a gentle crinkle at the corners of his eyes. "My pleasure, Alara. The sea's always better with company." He released her hand, but the memory of its warmth lingered. "Perhaps tomorrow, if the weather holds, you'd care to see Havenwood from the water." Her heart fluttered. It was an invitation, a gentle pull further into his world, into this new place. "I'd like that very much, Liam." He nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. "Sleep well, Alara." "You too, Liam." She watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the deepening twilight, before stepping inside. Mrs. Gable was knitting by the fire, her needles clicking softly. She looked up, a knowing smile on her face. "Evening, dear. Lovely walk?" Alara felt a blush creep up her neck. It was, Mrs. Gable. Havenwood is enchanting. Over the next few weeks, Havenwood truly began to unfold its magic for Alara. Liam became a steady, comforting presence. Their morning walks by the shore turned into longer conversations, sharing stories of their lives, albeit Ilara still held a few carefully guarded chapters. He spoke of his family, long gone, and his deep connection to the sea, a legacy passed down through generations. He described the rhythm of fishing, the patience it required, the quiet satisfaction of a good catch. Ilara, in turn, found herself opening up, drawn out by his calm, non-judgmental demeanor. She spoke of her love for art, the way colors and textures could tell stories, and the dream of creating her own haven, a space where beauty was born from brokenness. She didn't delve into the specifics of her past heartbreak, but she hinted at a time when her spirit had been dimmed, when her trust had been fractured. Liam listened, truly listened, his gaze steady and kind, never probing, but always offering a silent reassurance that she was safe here, with him. He took her out on his fishing boat, a sturdy vessel named the Sea Whisper. The experience was exhilarating. The vast expanse of the ocean, the salt spray on her face, the rhythmic dip and rise of the boat, it all felt incredibly freeing. She watched him work, his movements precise and strong, yet imbued with a profound respect for the sea. He showed her how to bait a hook, how to read the tides, how to spot the subtle signs of marine life. She even caught a small fish, reeling it in with a laugh that felt genuinely light and unburdened for the first time in years. "You're a natural, Ilara," he'd said, his eyes twinkling. "The sea likes you." Slowly, Ilara began to piece together her new life. With Mrs. Gable's help, she found a small, charming cottage near the harbor, complete with a bright, airy room perfect for an art studio. It was older, with creaky floorboards and a slightly overgrown garden, but it had good bones and a spirit that resonated with her own. She spent her days painting, sketching, and collecting treasures from the beach. Sea glass, smooth pebbles, driftwood, incorporating them into her mixed media pieces. Her art began to reflect the vibrant colors of Havenwood, the blues and greens of the ocean, the earthy tones of the cliffs, the cheerful hues of the wildflowers. She also started to build her small shop. It was just a corner of the cottage, but she envisioned it as a place of quiet beauty. She named it Drift and Dream, selling her art, handcrafted jewelry made from sea glass and small, whimsical decor pieces. The townspeople, initially curious, soon became her first customers. Mrs. Gable was her most enthusiastic patron, commissioning a painting of the Havenwood Lighthouse. One afternoon, as Ilara was meticulously arranging a display of sea-themed pottery, Liam arrived with a freshly caught mackerel, wrapped in parchment paper. "Thought you might appreciate a good supper," he said, leaning against the doorframe, a comfortable smile on his face. "Liam, you're too kind," she laughed, her hands dusted with clay. Come in. I was just about to make some tea." He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over her evolving studio. "It's coming along beautifully, Ilara. Full of life. Just like you." The compliment warmed her to her core. She'd spent so long feeling like a dimmed candle, and Liam's words were like a gentle breeze fanning the flame back to life. They sat and talked for hours, the mackerel forgotten for a while. He told her about a particularly challenging day at sea, and she confided in him about her anxieties over opening the shop, the familiar fear of failure gnawing at her. "You won't fail, Ilara," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Your art, it's special. It has a piece of your heart in it. People will see that." He reached across the small table and gently squeezed her hand. "And even if it doesn't take off exactly as you imagine, you're still here. You're still creating. That's what matters." His unwavering belief in her was a balm to her soul. It was a kind of love she hadn't experienced before, quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in respect and understanding. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. Liam introduced her to other fishermen, to the gruff but kind owner of the general store, to the jovial baker whose sourdough was legendary. Ilara felt herself becoming a part of the fabric of Havenwood, no longer just a transient visitor, but a resident, a friend. Yet, a shadow still lingered. The memory of her past, of a broken engagement, and a betrayal that had left her with a deep-seated fear of trust, sometimes crept in. She found herself pulling back, just a little, whenever things felt too good, too perfect. Liam noticed these subtle shifts. He never pushed, but his quiet observations were a testament to how truly he saw her. One blustery autumn evening, After a particularly quiet dinner at her cottage, Elara finally broached the subject. "Liam," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He met her gaze, his expression open and understanding. "You don't have to, Elara. Not if you're not ready." "I think I need to," she confessed, twisting her hands in her lap. She took a deep breath and recounted the story, not in bitter detail, but as a journey of pain and resilience. The fiancé who had taken advantage of her trust, the financial losses, the public humiliation, the feeling of being utterly alone and foolish. It made me wary of everything, of believing in happiness, of trusting anyone again, especially with my heart. Her voice trembled. "I'm scared, Liam. Scared of letting myself fall, only to break again." Liam listened patiently, his hand resting gently over hers, offering silent comfort. When she finished, a heavy silence settled between them, broken only by the wind rattling the window panes. "Elara," he finally said, his voice low and steady, "I can't promise you that life won't bring its share of storms. The sea teaches you that, but I can promise you that I will be a steady hand in the squall. I would never intentionally hurt you, and I would always, always try to understand." He looked into her eyes, his own filled with a quiet intensity. "Your past doesn't define you, Elara. It's a part of your journey, yes, but it doesn't dictate your future, and it certainly doesn't change how I see you, a woman of incredible strength, talent, and a heart that deserves all the beauty and love in the world." His words were a revelation, a soft light chasing away the shadows she'd carried for so long. He wasn't trying to fix her or erase her past, but simply to walk beside her, offering his strength and his love as an anchor. In that moment, Elara felt a profound shift within her. The fear was still there, a faint echo, but it was overshadowed by a burgeoning sense of hope and a deep, abiding trust in the man before her. "Thank you," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. It was a thank you not just for his words but for his patience, his kindness, his unwavering belief. He simply smiled, squeezing her hand. "Now, how about we finish that mackerel? I hear it pairs well with a good story." The opening of Drift and Dream was a quiet affair, but filled with warmth. Mrs. Gable brought a bouquet of wildflowers, the baker brought a small cake, and Liam, ever supportive, was there, his pride in her evident in his eyes. Elara's art, vibrant and soulful, resonated with the small community. Her sea-glass jewelry became a popular item, each piece a tiny shard of the ocean's beauty, transformed. As the days grew shorter and the air crisper, Elara found her rhythm in Havenwood. Her cottage, once just a house, now felt like a home, filled with the scent of paint, the soft glow of lamplight, and the quiet hum of creation. Her garden, once wild, now burst with hardy coastal flowers she'd carefully tended. One crisp winter morning, Liam found her in her studio, painting a large canvas depicting the Havenwood lighthouse, its beam cutting through a swirling storm, a metaphor for her own journey. He watched her for a long moment, the brush strokes sure and confident. "Elara," he said softly, breaking her concentration. She turned, a smile lighting her face. "Liam, you're early? Did you have a good catch?" He shook his head slightly, walking towards her. He took her hands, his touch warm against the chill of the studio. "Elara, I've watched you bloom here. You've built a home, a life, a place where your heart can truly sing. And you've woven yourself into the heart of Havenwood, and into mine." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box, intricately carved with a wave pattern. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a simple silver ring, adorned with a single, iridescent piece of sea glass, perfectly smooth and polished. "This piece," he explained, his voice thick with emotion, "I found it years ago, on a beach just north of here. It's been tumbled by countless tides, shaped by the wildness of the ocean, yet it shines brighter for it, just like you." He looked into her eyes, a depth of love shining there that took her breath away. "Elara, will you let me be your anchor in every storm, your calm in every sea? Will you marry me, and let us build our future together here in Havenwood?" Elara's heart swelled, tears blurring her vision. All the fears, all the lingering shadows of her past seemed to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. This wasn't a grand, superficial gesture, but a quiet, deeply personal promise, born from shared experiences, unwavering support, and a love that had grown organically, like the sturdy trees on the cliffside. "Yes, Liam," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, the cool metal and smooth sea glass feeling utterly perfect, a tangible symbol of their unique love story. He pulled her into a tender embrace, holding her close, and Ilara felt a peace she hadn't thought possible. Their wedding was a small, intimate affair in the spring, held on the very beach where Liam had first offered his hand. Mrs. Gable baked a cake, the townspeople gathered, and the sea played its timeless symphony in the background. Ilara wore a simple white dress, adorned with delicate shells and sea glass, a crown of wildflowers in her hair. As she walked towards Liam, bathed in the soft morning light, she felt completely, utterly herself, loved and cherished. Life in Havenwood continued its gentle rhythm. Drift and dream flourished, becoming a beloved spot for both locals and the occasional tourist who stumbled upon the hidden gem. Ilara continued to paint, her canvases now filled with joyful exuberance, often depicting Liam's boat cutting through sparkling waves, or quiet moments of him mending nets by the harbor. She and Liam built a life together, filled with quiet mornings watching the sunrise over the ocean, shared suppers of fresh seafood, and evenings spent by the fire, reading or simply enjoying each other's comforting presence. He would often bring her small treasures from his fishing trips, a particularly beautiful shell, a smooth piece of driftwood, or a rare piece of sea glass, each a silent testament to his enduring love and thoughtfulness. Ilara had found her haven, not just in the picturesque town, but within Liam's unwavering heart. The sea indeed had brought her to Havenwood, guiding her through turbulent waters to a peaceful shore, to a love that truly saw her, truly understood her, and offered not just a hand to walk beside her, but a heart to share her journey forever. As she drifted to sleep each night in Liam's arms, listening to the familiar lullaby of the waves, Ilara knew that her canvas was not just unfolding, but was now painted with the most vibrant, enduring colors of all: home, belonging, and an everlasting love.